Greetings, listeners. Howard and I spoke with a very special guest. She is one of the country's foremost attorneys on legal ethics, professional responsibility, the business of law, and the regulation of the legal profession. Today, we discuss the world of MSOs, ABSs, private equity, and law firms, and how prior to 2025, she would have one client conversation a year. And now she's working on 40 deals. We discussed how the ethics rules for MSOs are not new, and in fact have a long history of ethics opinions to rely upon, and much more. Enjoy. So welcome everyone to the Future is Bright podcast. My name is Chris Batts and joined by my co-host Howard Rosenberg. Howard and I are at the center of law firm talent and strategic growth here in New York City. Howard is a partner and the head of talent intelligence and acquisitions at Barrett & Brunel, and I advise and facilitate corporate law firm mergers at Columbus Street. And today we have a very exciting guest, Trisha Rich, partner at Holland Knight. Trish, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Trish, so excited to have you on the show and would love for you to give our audience just a brief background on what you're up to right now.
Sure. So I'm a partner at Holland Knight. I sit between the Chicago and New York offices of the firm. And at the firm, I lead what we call the legal profession team. It sits inside the litigation section. We're litigators for the most part. And we represent lawyers and law firms and legal technology companies and investors and stakeholders in the practice of law on any area that would touch the regulation of the legal profession. So I've been leading this team for a long time. We're the only big law firm that has a team that looks like my team. A lot of people are like, oh, you do legal mal. We actually don't do any legal mal. We do pretty much everything else. And what that entails a lot of these days is a lot of the restructuring and investment you're seeing in the practice of law. ABSs, MSOs, litigation finance, all of the areas of law that I call new law. I picked that term up from my very good friend, Lucian Pera. So I want to credit him. But that's a lot of what we're doing. And I'll tell you, as you guys know, because you had Lucian on talking about this recently, MSOs are the flavor of the day in the legal profession. And so we are spending a lot of time working on that.
And Trisha, you've been at Holland Knight for 20 years?
20 years in March, yeah.
Okay, amazing. And then you come to New York for a couple of reasons, but you're an NYU law professor, correct?
Right. I teach legal regulation in the law school at NYU, so I have an appointment there. And so we're in the beginning of December as we're recording this. By late December, I'll be in New York full time. And I'll start my class in January there. So yeah, I teach one semester a year in the space of legal regulation.
Very exciting. And then recently you've been made the incoming Chicago Bar president.
Yeah, so I was elected last February or March as first vice president of the Chicago Bar Association, which automatically ascends to the presidency, which will happen on June 25th, 2026. So yeah, I'm really excited about that. The Chicago Bar is just an incredible home here for lawyers in Chicago. I came up through the Young Lawyer section of the Chicago Bar Association, so I've been involved for many years. And I love the bar, and I love my bar, and I love bar associations generally. I'm also the past president of the Association of Professional Responsibility Lawyers, which is the national bar association for legal ethicists and legal regulation attorneys. So yeah, I'm a bar nerd a bit. But I'm really excited to lead the CBA. I think it's a really important time for lawyers to lean into bar associations. And so it couldn't come at a better moment.
Excellent. So for our listeners, who are not familiar with what an MSO is and an ABS and how this has turned you into a celebrity in the United States, would love for you to educate them to have that kind of base groundwork as we get into the details later.
Sure. I'll start. Sorry, this is the professor in me a little bit. Let me start at the beginning. We have a regulation in the practice of law in our rules of professional conduct, number 5.4, right? And what that is, the baseline of Rule 5.4 is a few important prohibitions. Number one, the prohibition on non-lawyer ownership of law firms in the United States, right? So you have to be a lawyer to own a law firm. Put a pin in that. We'll come back to it. The other, important prohibition in 5.4 for our purposes today is that lawyers cannot share fees with non-lawyers. Now, another thing I'll put a pin in, I don't particularly care for the term non-lawyer, but that's what the rule uses. So that's the phrase I'll use here today with you. In 2021, Arizona eliminated Rule 5.4 from its rules of professional conduct. And what that ended up doing is allowing two important things to change. Number one, all of a sudden, non-lawyers could own law firms in Arizona and manage and control them. And number two, any Arizona law firm could split fees with non-lawyers. That drove a lot of investment and innovation to the state of Arizona. And we have seen that over the last 5 years. There's a whole lot of lawyers right now that will tell you this is the end of the practice of law. It is not. ABSs, so when I use the term ABS, what I'm talking about, the only thing that means is it is a law firm that has at least one owner who is not a lawyer. So why is it not the end of the practice of law? Couple of things. Number one, other countries have been doing this for a long time, and law firms still exist and are still doing legal work in those other countries. But if you want to look domestically, DC has allowed non-lawyer owners in the practice of law since 1991, right? Mm-hmm. Lots of law firms have non-lawyer owners, and it's actually been just fine. People talk about Arizona, you hear the term Wild West. ABSs are by far, not even close, the most heavily regulated law firms in the United States. It is an arduous, expensive, time-consuming process to get an ABS approved in Arizona. You are regulated directly by the Supreme Court in a much more meaningful way than you see in any other state. And in fact, one of the regulations, and this comes straight from Europe, we don't really have this in the United States, but they lifted this and made it a feature of an ABS, is that you have to have a compliance lawyer who sits inside of your law firm. And this is absolutely fascinating. It's basically a legal ethics kind of role, a professional responsibility lawyer that sits in your law firm. But if there's a ethics problem, they have to report it, right? And so I have that kind of role in my law firm. And if somebody comes into my office and says, I have an ethics problem, that's a privileged conversation. Not only do I not report it, I can't report it, right? It is against my oath and all of the duties I have that if I went to the Supreme Court and said, hey, Jim Smith came in here and just said I committed malpractice, right? But in an Arizona ABS, that's actually a requirement of the ABS. So these are extremely heavily regulated law firms, and they're doing good work in Arizona. As of today's recording, there have only been 2 complaints in 5 years against ABSs that have, reached the sort of the public process. And, I challenge you to put that up against 150 law firms in any other state and see what those numbers look like. So that's an ABS. They're allowed in Arizona. There are some limited kinds of ABSs that are allowed in Utah. Puerto Rico is going to start allowing ABSs on January 1st. Washington is starting a sandbox program. It's kind of the lay of the land on ABSs. An MSO is something different. MSO stands for Management Service Organization. You'll hear other terms around MSOs. Sometimes you'll hear LSO, a Legal Service Organization, or But what we're talking about when we talk about an MSO is a management service company that is built and sits side by side with the law firm. It's a parallel company that handles the law firm's back operations. Now, an MSO can be set up anywhere. There's no geographic restrictions in the United States to an MSO, but here are the restrictions. you still can't. You still have to abide by Rule 5.4. So you cannot have, even though that MSO can be owned and controlled by non-lawyers or lawyers or a mix, it cannot, those non-lawyers nor the MSO can control or split fees with the law firm. So it will support the law firm. It will work very closely with the law firm. It will be paid out of law firm revenues, a fair market value for the services that the MSO provides, but it cannot control or own the law firm. The law firm remains independent. And so the best way to think about it, the way that I tell our clients to think about it, is that if you have an ABS sitting in Arizona, you can have ownership control, you can have management control, but you have limited geographic flexibility. An MSO allows you complete geographic flexibility, but with much more limited control over the management, operations, and ownership of the law firm itself.
Yeah. So you released an article this week, and it was a big deal, I think, because you just brought up all this history and the foundation of where MSOs come out of. Can you provide us a little bit for my audience, the precursor to the MSO, and what was some of that history that allowed MSOs to be a big deal today?
Sure. It's, one of the interesting things right now, and you guys are seeing it too, because you're doing, Chris, you especially are doing a lot of work in this space. But this is clearly the next big thing. And so there are a lot of people rushing into the space right now, trying to sort of stake themselves out as experts. And no disrespect to that. I mean, it's a burgeoning market, and frankly, we need a few more experts in it. But one of the things I was seeing people say in articles and blog posts and comments on the internet is, the ethics of this are untested, or we don't know how that, ethics will shake out on this, or nobody knows what the regulators will say. And I was sitting in my office and I was thinking yeah, I do. I know exactly what they'll say, because this is not a new problem. We do not have new legal ethics problems. And by the way, if you talk to any actual legal ethicists, if you talk to me or Lucian or my friend Tyler Molesby, we would all tell you the same thing. But there's not that many of us. And so what was happening is I was seeing this rise in articles on, sort of this hype around, but we don't know what the regulators are going to say. And we, my partner, Josh Port, and I, who works in Nashville, who's the corporate side of our team, Josh and I were meeting with clients every single day, and they would say, but we don't know what the regulators will say. And I was like, yeah, we do. And they were like, what? And I was like, trust me, bro, we got this. We know what the regulators, we know what they're looking for and what they're going to say. And I was just having this same conversation over and over again, where I was like, this is not a new problem. We saw this with PEOs. We saw this with litigation finance. We saw it with legal staffing companies. Hell, we saw it with landlords, right? I mean, we've seen this problem solved in the practice of law for a very long time. And finally, I was just like, I just got to sit down and figure out a tangible example and write the history of this for people. And that's what my team decided to do. So we wrote this article that we released on Monday, and it traces the history of one other kind of service provider in the practice of law, the PEO, the Professional Employee Organization or Employment Organization. And even though we only have 2 opinions out there about MSOs, there's a slew of them about PEOs from all kinds of jurisdictions. And PEOs are substantially similar to MSOs, as we talk about in our article, and we make that case there. But we can look at the opinions on PEOs and see what the regulators are looking at. And it's those same 2 issues over and over again. Number 1, who is controlling the lawyers in the law firm? Are they still independent? And number 2 is the way that the revenue is transferred. Does it amount to an improper fee split, or is it actually fair market value for the services the PEO is providing? And in my article, I make the point. I say, I picked PEOs for this example, but I could have picked litigation finance. I could have picked, legal staffing companies. I could have picked anything that we've seen the rise in the practice of law and made that same comparison, because it's the same 2 issues over and over again, right? Is there independence of the lawyer, and are you fee splitting? That's a little bit of a simplification. There are some other issues around the edges. Like obviously we can't have non-competes in the practice of law, and we have to control for conflicts, and we have to keep confidentiality in place. Like there are other things we need to worry about on a case by case basis, but those are the two big issues we're looking for, and they've been solved over and over and over again. We have dozens, 100 years of ethics opinions telling us how to solve these. This is not a new problem, and I needed to sort of write that down for people that are new to the space.
So Trish, let me jump in here. I've got two questions. Maybe for the sake of our listeners, can you kind of outline, without breaching confidentiality of clients, you're a hot commodity in the marketplace at the moment. And to give a flavor, like how many deals are you seeing in the marketplace on a month compared to maybe this time last year? Because this whole area has exploded. And number two, why now? What's unique about the marketplace in terms of consolidation, why your phone is ringing off the hook?
Yes, it is crazy. I've never seen anything like this. I'll start by saying that I've been practicing for 20 years. There's never been a moment in time before where I've walked into any room with lawyers and I've said, I'm a legal ethicist, and somebody has said, tell me more about that, right? That has never happened before. And all of a sudden we're the cool kids at every party. And that's I will say that's been kind of nice. But it's a really interesting time. I want to say one important thing, and that's that MSOs have been around for a long time. I've been practicing 20 years. They've been in the practice of law at least as long as I have. It's just that there's a significant amount of renewed attention on them in this moment. So I'll start, Howard, with your second question first. Why now? I have a few theories, but I'm not exactly for sure. I think ABSs probably got people thinking about the ways they could invest and support the legal industry as non-lawyers, and got people thinking more flexibly about those issues. And when you set an ABS down next to an MSO is probably more attractive to a lot of people for a number of important reasons. And so I think maybe ABSs sort of showed people what was possible, but MSOs became a more feasible path. Also, KPMG Law obviously, opened its doors this year, and that drew a ton of attention to this industry. Our friends there, and I think what they're doing is really neat. So I think that, got people talking. There's just been a lot of focus on sort of the regulation of the practice of law and how people can enter it over the last few years that I think has really led to a burgeoning moment here. I'll tell you, a year ago, Josh and I were talking about these once in a while. Now we have 6, 8, 10 meetings a day, every single day. I joked to Josh last night, we were both sitting at our desks at 10:30 at night still. And I finally, on my Teams chat, I said, listen, I gotta get home. I gotta hit McDonald's. I gotta do my 46 step face routine. And it looks like our next meeting's at 8 a.m. I'll see you back here in the morning. Right. And those are our days right now. We do all of our work before 9 a.m. or after 5 p.m. because between those hours of 9 and 5, we're talking to law firms, investors, family offices, people that are just wanting to learn about the space. And we think actually a big part of what we're doing right now is educating people. And so we're glad to take those calls. I'll say we did see this coming. We're really close with the team at Adams and Reese, Lucian Pera and his team. Lucian's a long time friend of mine, past president of Tennessee Bar and past president of April, like I am. And so it was probably the beginning of the year, January, February. Josh and I noticed we were just getting an uptick in calls. So I reached out to Lucian and I was like, hey, can my team and your team sit down? And we had a meeting at the beginning of the year. And I was like, this is like something's in the water, right? And he's like, yeah, we're getting them too. I know what you mean. We've gone from one call a year to one call a week. And so we could tell it was coming. And we talked then. Actually, at that time, I collected every single article I could find all of time on legal MSOs, and there were 6. Wow. And they had just mentioned it in passing. And I had this folder on my desktop. And at the time, I was like, I'm just going to set up a Google alert and, we're going to be able to track this. And then, but we had the idea then with, by just talking in this small bubble, we need to start writing more about this because this is going to explode and people need to have resources on how to be setting these up correctly and like thinking about them correctly, because it's not the same as a medical MSO. It's not the same as a veterinary or accounting MSO. I mean, our rules are different and we need to respect that. So yeah, there's been a huge explosion. Last year, Josh and I were working on like 1 or 2 of them. As I sit here today, we're working on 40 separate transactions during all different phases. There are big firms, large firms, very small firms, successful firms, but firms that are forward thinking, firms that are thinking about sort of, where, what do I want to invest in next? How am I gonna get the capital to build an AI platform or a tech stack? Or, as you guys both know, the way that law firms grow now is largely through lateral acquisitions. And so where's that money going to come from? We're an industry where every dollar we spend is tied to a dollar that a lawyer built. But, we don't have, I always joke, we don't have snack bars in the basement where we're getting that like second stream of revenue in a law firm that like frees up capital for us to do other things with. So, this is really opens a lot of doors for a lot of people.
And going back to kind of the central theme about why now, I think this is where Chris and I kind of see this happening on a daily basis. Kind of our hypothesis that, going back to your the perfect storm, I think you've got a mixture of obviously the talent markets doing unbelievable things. You've got the AI coming on stream in a very, very profound way. And now you've got the increase of capital coming into the business. And those are 3 really potent ingredients that when mixed, this whole thing kind of rearranges the growth curve for many firms about how they compete in the marketplace. And you have a ringside seat on the ethics side of this kind of, venture. And so that's what's really interesting about all this, because it's a moment in time that who knows how long that's going to last for. But at the moment, it's just crazy season.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd also add to that, Howard, one of the things that's to me the most fascinating about this is lawyers are typically, I'm generalizing a bit here, but lawyers are not business people and we're not math people, right? We ended up here because we weren't good at math. If we were good at math, we'd all be engineers and we'd make more money.
Or you didn't like blood, one or the other.
Right. Yeah, exactly right. Like that's like, we are a very self-selecting profession and it's not an accident that we all got here, right? And so then, I don't know what your guys' educational backgrounds are. Mine's philosophy. Josh has a degree in classics, right? And if you do so well as a lawyer, all of a sudden they put you in charge of a business. What happened, right? And I read once, I need to verify this before I say it too many more times, but only 8% of lawyers have a business degree. And I think that's fascinating. I actually do have one, but I don't use it. And really, I was a philosophy professor before I became a lawyer. So it's not, our bread and butter as lawyers is not running businesses. I represent dozens of law firms, right? And, the thing that I always tell, especially my smaller law firms, is you have to understand that running a law firm is 2 full-time jobs. It is the practice of law. It is the thing you went to school for. It is clients. It is solving people's problems. And it is also running a business. And so there's something attractive to lawyers about having the ability to offload some of those business functions that they never wanted to do anyway. That's not why we went to law school. And so, that's not everybody, but man, that's a lot of lawyers. It's also really fun, I'll say, to use your phrase, I would have a ringside seat for lawyers and PE talking to each other for the first time. Like the PE bros will be like, what's your revenue? And lawyers will be like, I don't know. They'll be like, what's your EBITDA? And lawyers are like, what does that even mean? And so those conversations have been really interesting because for the most part, lawyers and investors are talking two different languages, and to watch them come together in ways that benefit both sides. And I think may, if we're lucky, if we get this right, benefit the public, right? It's been a really fun time to be in legal regulation.
Well, let me chime in. So, a fourth of your third reasons for why this might be happening right now. So the accounting industry is getting blown up by PE, and professional services. I mean, people have said that legal may be the last frontier of professional services looking at private equity. So there is other interesting market forces where there's a lot of similarity of what's taken place on the PE side within accounting industry and all the roll-ups and platforms that are taking place, and how that's spilling easily into the legal industry, as well as the convergence of these professional service firms, maybe even coming together. So we saw KPMG with ABS, and I'm Trish, I don't know if you're allowed to say if you worked on that or not, but I know that took place.
I'm allowed to say that I did not. And I didn't. If I had, I would say I can't say.
Okay, understood. And then obviously an accounting firm, Aprio, bought a law firm through an ABS in Arizona. So there's convergence taking place. And we're like, why not legal? Because they're highly profitable and all these things. So I know that's playing a part. Trish, I wanted to pick your brain on this. So Texas Opinion 706, big talked about one around the MSOs, them publicly talking about it. And then the PEO precedent that you brought up in the article draws this hard line about tying benefit to direct revenue and profits. So if an MSO can't take a percentage of revenue, what's so exciting to PE that actually they want to get excited about, like flat bill rates? Like, why would they be excited about this, and why this structure would work?
Yeah, I think I've heard also sort of the final frontier phrase about law firms and the legal industry as well. And I think that gets tossed around a lot. And it may very well be accurate, right? I think for PE, they can still, or other kinds of investors, and also don't forget and discount that, the earliest iterations of MSOs were just law firms setting them up for themselves, right? And there's a lot of benefit to doing that too, that we won't, in the interest of time, I won't run down that road right now, but like an MSO can look like a lot of different kinds of things. And so I don't want to just gloss over that too much, because it's, I think, an important point, but when an MSO is providing services to a law firm, real tangible services, it can get paid for that, very well. If you're outsourcing all of your third-party services, and there's somebody else that's competently handling those, and even, your marketing, your IP, all sorts of things like that, the revenue stream is there. I mean, it's a good deal for investors if they're set up right, and if they are. It's not just, I always say, I can give you the best legal advice in the world, but like any lawyer, all I can do is hope you walk out the door and follow it, right? It's not just the setting up, it's the respecting the divide between, what the MSO can do and what it can't do when it comes to the lawyers, the law firms, and importantly, their client relationships.
Trish, why? I just wanted to go back in your history. Like, what was the driving force about going to law school, given your philosophy kind of background? Yeah.
Well, I've always thought about lawyers as philosophers that have jobs. I enjoyed the field of philosophy very much, but I was a first gen student. I grew up on a farm in Michigan in like a really small town. I was, the first person in my family to go to college and graduate, all of those things. And so, I am very grateful for that upbringing. My husband was born and raised in the Bronx, and I was born in rural Michigan in a town of 400 people. So we have, complete polar opposite upbringings. And I think that has given me a really good outlook on life and an extremely good work ethic. But man, I was not going back to the farm. I was not going to milk cows for the rest of my my life. And so, and no disrespect, we need those people. My husband and I still own property back there, but I was singularly focused on building a career that would sustain me, and I loved the practice of law. Even since I was a young kid, I would watch Jack McCoy on TV. I met Sam Waterston earlier this year, and I told him, I was a kid growing up in Michigan, and I watched you on TV, and I wanted to be a lawyer. And I was like, but I'm sure you hear that all the time. And he's like, no, I really don't. But I really always love the idea of effectuating change through the legal system. And it's really what drew me to the profession.
And then how did you get into the ethics space?
My philosophical background was in ethics. And so, but that's like a completely different thing, obviously. Like what I do is legal regulation. What I did as a philosopher was like Kant and Sartre. So it's like a totally different thing. But I really enjoyed this. I took legal ethics in law school like everybody else. I had Len Niehoff at Michigan. And I just really liked the class. And one of the things I like, and I tell my students today about our rules of professional conduct is, and I come at this like a philosopher, I think, it does two completely independent things. And number one is it regulates the morality of the practice of law, right? Don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal. It's all in there, all right? And then it does like these very technical regulations, like if you run an advertisement, it must include the address of the law firm. And like we matched that all together in like one code, and then we're like, here you go, good luck. I thought that was so interesting, even as a law student, that we were trying to do both of those things in one set of rules. And so I was really, when I started at my firm, I was really interested in it. And, I would try to work on like legal regulation matters as I saw them. But there weren't a lot in those days when I first started here. But when I was a mid-level associate, my firm acquired a team of legal ethicists led by Peter Jarvis, who is a legend in our field, and whose book I have sitting right here on my desk, and Allison Martin Rhodes, who is now the general counsel of Shepherd Mullen. So Peter's retired, and Allison has gone in-house. But I came up under them, and that was just it was the best upbringing that somebody like me could have in a field like this one. I owe them both so much. I think so highly of them both. Allison's books also sits on my desk. And I just, that really enmeshed me in the legal ethics world, which is a small one.
I have to ask, because it's like the one question that everyone talks about that doesn't feel like it's fully answered. Why do PI attorneys, personal injury attorneys, splash their faces all over billboards and somehow they're permitted to do that and no one else can't? Can you answer that one weird question that everyone wonders about?
Number one, it works, right? Legal advertising is a multi-billion-dollar industry in the United States, so it works, right? It's not an accident that, like, when you drive down a highway, you see billboards with like accident lawyers, and when you're at 26 and Cal, like our criminal courthouse, and you walk outside, there's a criminal defense lawyer ad on the bus stop right outside the courtroom, right? That's not an accident. It's literally how it works. So that's the first thing, like it works. The second thing is you could, like if my firm wanted to put a billboard out on 94, it could, but that's not how big law firms clients find their lawyers. People find me because they read my article about Texas 706 and they have a question about that, and but if you are a random person that grew up on a farm in Michigan and you don't know any lawyers and you get into a car accident on the highway, you're going to look up and see that billboard, and that's the lawyer you're going to call, right? And so I actually love legal advertising because I think it really gets lawyers connected with clients who otherwise wouldn't be able to find lawyers or access information. A lot of lawyers look down their nose at it. That's not me at all. I love it.
So there's no tight regulations around it? Oh, I mean, I imagine there are, but it's like...
Absolutely. There's a ton of regulations around legal advertising, but And the ABA, my friend Lucian, again, tried to fix this, and the ABA made a lot of progress on this back in 2016. But at the state level, those more progressive advertising regulations haven't really been adopted wholesale yet. We're working on it, but I think it's seen as like a solution to a problem that doesn't really exist very well. So they've been slow to adopt it. But yeah, it's heavily regulated. That advertising is heavily regulated. But the billboards you see out on the highway largely comply with those.
Okay. Very good. Well, Trish, I think we can have you for 3 hours on here talking through all of it, and we'll need to bring you back for sure. So, Trish, how can people find you, contact you, follow you on social media?
Yeah, the best place to find me is LinkedIn. That's where I'm most active. So I'm Trisha.Rich, Trisha, Rich.
Awesome. And then, Trish, please finish this sentence. The future is bright because?
The future is bright because there's just so much happening right now, and it's so interesting, and it gives us a moment in time to like really think about how we regulate the practice of law and whether or not we're doing that correctly.
Yeah. Thank you, Trish. It's been an honor, pleasure. Appreciate your time.
Fantastic having you.
Thank you for having me.